Poďme to rozprodiť. Dneska je 150. relaxačný tréningový deň. 19.4.2024. Začíname 18.39. Dneska sme vytočili dvoch nulákov. Veľmi solidné prevedenie, veľmi solidné gašperky. A teraz sa samozrejme ideme rozprodiť. Poďme to rozprodiť. Tu máme. Pozrieme, či Plešinka prišiel domov, Plešinka je doma. Náš Plešter. Náš Mákovič Závin. Trošku zase mu ide udýchať Plešinke. Stáva sa to, že to podľa dneska sú klikožrutí 90, 80, 70, 60 a 50 klikožrutový piatok. Poďme to roztočiť. Potom si pustíme nejaký podmas. To asi je za nami. Pustíme si nejaký podmas. Pustíme si tohto, čo?
No, there's no plan B. Let's just stop the nonsense right now. America will never deploy troops to Ukraine. NATO will never deploy troops to Ukraine because to do so is instant death. NATO doesn't have the capacity to project power, meaningful power into Ukraine. It's going to take France months to get one brigade, 5,000 guys into Ukraine. They will all die within a week. Then there's nothing to back them up. What are we sending to Ukraine? This is stupidity in the extreme. The world needs to wake up to the fact that there is no plan B for Ukraine. Ukraine is going to die a miserable death thanks to the West. It could stop the torture today by surrendering. But there will not be terms set forth. There's talk about a peace conference in Switzerland. To discuss what? If the Russians aren't at the table, you don't have a peace conference, do you? What is Europe trying to decide? The conditions under which what? The conflict will terminate? The conflict only terminates when Russia says we're done. Russia has the only vote that counts. And so the question is, are you going to do it the easy way or the hard way? The easy way is to give up now, save lives, save infrastructure. The hard way, Russia will terminate Ukraine. It is a done deal. The Russians have made it clear that there will not be a Zelensky regime when this is done. The Russians have made it clear that Western Ukraine will not be configured the way they are politically right now. The ultra-nationalists will be terminated. Banderism will be destroyed. There will be no residual neo-Nazi ideology allowed on Ukrainian soil. Now, if the Ukrainians play it smart, Russia may allow them to retain Odessa and Kharkov, but only if Ukraine is configured as a sovereign state that is part of a political economic union with Russia and Belarus. In that case, Russia has nothing to fear about Odessa or Kharkov. But if Ukraine wants to do it the hard way, then Russia will take over Odessa, take over Kharkov, and leave nothing but this pathetic occupied rump state, which has no economic viability and no sustainability as a nation state. Ukraine will never be a part of NATO. Ukraine will never be a member of the European Union. That is not in the cards for Ukraine. And let's be honest, the European Union never intended to bring Ukraine in. What are they bringing in? This basket case of a nation? Why would the European Union do that? They're throwing out promises, lying to the Ukrainians, dangling this carrot in front of them. But Ukraine will never be a member of the European Union, and they will never be a member of NATO. This is cruel and unusual punishment for Stoltenberg, Blinken, and others to talk about the potential. We're building a bridge to NATO membership. Well, let's call that bridge the Francis Scott Key Bridge. And it's been crumpled into the sea, and it's not going to be rebuilt for a long, long time, if ever. That's the reality. And that's where we're at right now. Ukraine has no future. Has no future. It's finished.
Are we approaching the final days of this conflict?
We're in the final. I mean, this conflict's been going on for 2 years. I don't believe it's going to go on for another year. The Russians are accumulating overwhelming military power. And, they are grinding the Ukrainians down to nothing. If the faster Russia goes, the more casualty Russia takes. Russia's not in the business of taking casualties right now. So Russia is just going to grind Ukraine down, grind it down, and move in when there's nothing left. But that's happening sooner rather than later. Ukraine is running out of everything. They have no air defense. So the Russians have accumulated these glide bombs, these Fab 250s, 500s, 1500s. Now we have Fab 3000s coming in, and everybody acknowledges that the Russian Air Force now just comes in. There's nothing to shoot it down. They drop these bombs outside of any air defense range that the Ukrainians might have retained. And these bombs come in and kill everything. And then the Russian forces move forward a little bit, and the Ukrainians fall back. The bombs come in and kill everything. The Russians move forward a little bit, and Russia will play this game all day long. They have, unlike the West, which can't produce artillery shells, apparently, Russia is producing a lot of bombs, mass production of these bombs, and they're going to drop these bombs and they're going to kill every Ukrainian in front of them. That's the way this war is going to be fought. It's going to be bloody. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be devastating for the Ukrainians. And there's nothing that can happen to change that. There is no plan B.
How do you see the final days? Do you think it's going to be the same way that it was during the Nazi Germany?
No, the Russians and Nazi Germany, look, the Battle of Berlin cost Russia 100,000 lives. Russia's not in the business of losing 100,000 lives. It's not going to be a fair fight. It's not going to be a stand-up fight. The German army was a very capable army, even to the end. Highly disciplined troops, good weapons, the ability to, as long as they maintained combat cohesion, they represented a threat to the Russians on a tactical level. The Ukrainians don't represent a threat to the Russians anymore. This is mass murder. You don't believe anything British intelligence says. 1,000 Russians dying a day. The Russians are suffering the lowest level of casualties they have suffered in the entire conflict today because they have such overwhelming dominance on the battlefield. But again, their job isn't to take territory quickly at this time. Their job is just to kill Ukrainians. And they're doing that every single day while they're taking territory. So all the people that point the map said, well, it hasn't moved very much. Well, no, but there has been a lot of territorial, modifications. The cemeteries that the Ukrainians have to dig to bury the bodies that are recovered from the battlefield. So, this is a tragedy, but it's a tragedy that the West foisted upon Ukraine. And Ukraine has made a decision. Now they're even talking about they're going to mobilize women. So Ukraine is literally committing suicide as a nation state.
When it comes to the confrontation, people who are so in favor of NATO and saying that NATO can crush Russia, NATO can do everything with Russia, it always comes to the mind that when we look at the NATO countries today, none of them had a serious experience in a real war. Correct me if I'm mistaken, because the only country that has experience in the war is the United States in the aftermath of the World War II, just the United States together with some countries within NATO. Most of these countries don't have any experience on the battlefield and don't know how does it work. And the other thing would be the nature of these wars that the United States fought so far, that were totally different from what we've seen so far in Ukraine.
First of all, let's just correct, the United States has no relevant combat experience either. We just spent, the average military career is what, 20 years? 20 years ago was 2004, and we were fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. Low intensity conflict has no bearing on what's going on right now. And we don't know how to fight modern war. We don't know how to fight. We're trying to retrain ourselves, but it takes time. When they talk about NATO air power, I hear a lot of people going, well, look what we did to Kosovo, we being NATO. Well, go back and look at the NATO air campaign in Kosovo. It's literally a case study in incompetence and ineffectiveness. Yes, they defeated a almost defenseless country, but the air campaign wasn't effective. It ended up killing a lot of civilians. It wasn't a good military campaign. Had the Serbians had an effective integrated air defense, NATO would have been defeated. NATO almost defeated itself because of sheer incompetence. That's the reality of the NATO air campaign. And yet people are going, look what we did. Look what they did to Libya. No air defense. And, they're proud of this. If NATO went up against Russia, a Russian air defense like this, it would be the end of NATO. Their air defense can't beat the Russians. They have no combat experienced pilots. I saw the other day there was this F-16 pilot, Dan Hammond or something of that nature, saying, I will volunteer to go in and help the things. And everybody's like, oh God, he's the most experienced F-16 pilot in the world. He has no air-to-air combat experience. So how good is he going to be? And his combat experience is bombing defenseless nations. How good is he going to be? No, he'll die on the first hour too, because he doesn't know what's going to happen. He's going to get up there in an airframe with an F-16 that's not that good. He's going to go up and the Russians are going to shoot it down. Or he's going to try and land an airfield that no longer exists. The stupidity of these people is beyond comprehension. We need to look at the cold, hard facts. Russia spent 2 years perfecting the art of modern warfare. And they're very good at it. Are they perfect? Nobody's perfect. Does Russia make mistakes? Everybody makes mistakes. But, in the world of combat, first of all, understand that Russia knows now how to do an operation, take losses, adapt, and keep going. They can take a punch. Nobody in the West knows that they can take a punch. Nobody in the West has been punched. So what happens when the West goes up against a fighter like Russia that hits it? Maybe they knock the West out first punch. Maybe they don't, but now the West has to retreat to its corner. It's in a defensive stance. Russia's just going to pummel it all day long because Russia knows how to fight. They've trained for the fight. The West has been training for a 1 or 2 round skirmish. That's all we know how to do. brigade-sized element come in, rapid, air power, crush the enemy, that's it. Russia's training for the 15-round championship fight. They're ready for all 15 rounds. They're ready to be Muhammad Ali in the Thrilla in Manila, taking George Foreman out, Joe Frazier out in the 14th round, because we're better. They're better than we are. They'll outlast us. They'll land punches. They'll beat the crap out of us. NATO's not ready for the fight. We've been on the couch. We've been eating. We've gotten fat. We're not training. Russia's training right now. What does NATO think they're going to do? I mean, you had these loudmouths who fought in Kosovo. That's their big combat experience. And they're saying, oh, NATO air power will turn things around. They couldn't win in Kosovo. They were incompetent in Kosovo. And now they want to take this incompetence that is NATO coalition warfare and apply it against the Russians. It's stupidity in the extreme.
Whenever they're talking about the NATO confrontation with Russia, they're thinking that Russia would be alone. Do you think that at the end of the day, these countries like Belarus, like Iran, even China, do you think if something happens between Russia and NATO, these countries would stay aside and do nothing about it?
Well, first of all, we know that Belarus will not stay silent. If NATO attacks Russia, Belarus is automatically in the fight. China just had a meeting. Xi Jinping met with Sergei Lavrov, and the statement made by the Chinese foreign minister at the end of this meeting was that that while China and Russia will never conspire to attack a third nation, if NATO or Western powers attack either Russia or China, they will come to their aid and fight for them on their behalf. And they also said that Russia and China will come to the aid of nations who are subjected to attacks from the West that threaten international security. Look, this means it's game, set, match. If NATO gets involved in Ukraine, China will become involved. Now, does that mean that Chinese divisions are going to show up in Ukraine? No.
No, je to za nami. 150. naše tréninky vidíte za nami. Bolo 19.4.2024. Skončili sme 18.56. Segment trval 17 minút a 27 sekúnd.